Looks like we have a quorum. I don't see Stephanie on the line. Stephanie, are you out there somewhere? And do we know if Jim is going to be joining us today?
He's probably just, Jim Stinson is there.
Yeah, he's there. Good. All right. Well, we've got our legal counsel here. That's good. So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Brian, I'll let you talk about our procedures for today, and then we'll move forward.
Thank you, Kyle. This is Brian Yates with Schwartz Page and Harding, and welcome to the Montgomery County MUD number 7 Board of Directors meeting for Tuesday, June the 15th, 2021. As in prior meetings, I'll briefly go through our remote meeting procedures and then perform a roll call. So to begin with, I need to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Second, please remember to state your name before you speak, including the making of any motions. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Third, we'll continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting remotely today so that we can accurately reflect the attendance in the minutes of the meeting. I'll perform a roll call for the board members, followed by consultants. When you hear your name or your company called, please respond by indicating that you're present in the meeting. Likewise, if you need to leave the meeting before it adjourns, please announce that you're doing so before you disconnect. Once I've completed the roll call for directors, staff, and consultants, I'll ask for any members of the public to identify themselves for the record. Starting with the roll call for our board of directors, Kyle Mays,
Here.
Paul Nelson,
Paul Nelson here.
Henry Cheek,
Henry Cheek here.
Don Sarich,
Yes, here.
Stephanie Zertucci.
Present.
Okay, we do have a full quorum of our board present, so we will move on to the roll call for Woodlands Water staff. Jim Stinson,
Present.
Mike Mooney,
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois.
Here.
Jeannie Scott is out at CLE today, so we'll go on to Shelley Lawson Kennedy.
I'm here.
Anyone else from Woodlands Water in the meeting?
Randy Edwards.
Okay. And anyone else from Woodlands Water? All right, we will move on to San Jacinto River Authority staff. Ron Kelly,
Present.
Ed Shackelford,
Present.
Chris Meeks,
Present.
Pat Corley.
Present.
Anyone else from the River Authority in the meeting?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll move on to MUD 7 consultants. Do we have any MUD 7 consultants in the meeting today? If not, we'll move on now to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public present in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record as well.
Yes, sir. Chandra Lapierre.
Okay, any other members of the public? Maureen, does that cover everyone who appears to be logged in?
That's everybody.
All right, that'll complete the roll call. I'll hand it back over to Kyle to begin the agenda. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brian. That brings us to item 2 on the agenda, to receive comments from the public. We do have one member of the public with us tonight. Were you wanting to make a comment to the board, or are you here to just listen?
I'm here regarding an adjustment. There is an issue, and I was advised by Barbara and Diane of the Woodlands Water to take that up with the board today.
All right. I'm looking to see if there's a specific line item for that on the agenda, or
I sent about a 22-page document email this morning to Mrs. S. Lawson, Shelley Lawson. Was supposed to send it out on my behalf to everybody.
okay, just one second. Jim, is this something that we need to take up on today's, at this point on today's agenda?
I don't think we can. And I was just informed with this a little while ago. Mike and Randy have some background information. I think we,
Okay.
if I understood correctly, we invited Ms. LaPierre
Curious, sir.
to come to the meeting last week and fill out a request to address the board, but for some reason that was declined. And so we weren't aware.
No, I was never advised. I have it by email that I was advised today on the 15th at 4:30. And I had been calling ever since because my normal water bill is $60 and I'm getting charged for over $1,000 in usage. Or there's no
Wow.
proof of a leak, there's no proof of the meter being inaccurate, there's no water, no damage to my home, I have no water softener, no irrigation. I lived there 3 years and paid my bill and I'm a single mom. And you guys want to cut my water off now over water that you're saying stop repaired, and there's no proof of repair or a leak. And you want me to pay $1,000 bill.
All right, well, this is Kyle Mays and I'm the board president. And certainly if that's what's going on, that seems unfair. And so what I can promise you is that we will do our best to figure out what is going on and make sure that you are treated fairly. And if there's a problem, you know, that the mud can fix and repair, you know, and correct all this, we will do our best to do that in such a way that you pay as little as possible. And sounds like we need to do some more homework before we can say, okay, well, we have a resolution for this. And so I hope, you know, that's something we can act on very quickly, particularly if there's a leak, and stop it as soon as possible.
Yes, sir, because I identified it to the water company April 7th, and it's been just pouring, and they say off and on, but there's no repairs, there's no water. We can't find where the water is. Randy says the meter's working right, but I've got a feeling that I have some neighbors that have some water damage and tree damage due to Aztec doing some cable lining, because even the most usage of water, they say this big dump, I have proof for me and my children, the home was empty and we were in Hawaii for a week in April. So I'm just, like I said, I've never been disconnected. I paid my bill on time and I printed out over 21 pages from all the way back to 2019, where my water bill's never been over $60 a month.
Okay, well, that all makes sense. Obviously, there's a reason why their bill is this high and we need to figure it out. And Jim, do you have any ideas, or what would you like to say something at this point as far as what the mud district, or what the mud can do to, I mean, I think we can at least agree that, or vote that, you know, that we shouldn't cut off the water at this point. We need to figure it out, and there's more homework to do before any kind of extreme step like that would happen.
Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And again, I'm recently getting bits and pieces of information. Mike and Randy, I know that y'all have been there, and I think there is a AMI meter on this residence. Is that correct? Getting detailed usage data?
The new meter?
Yes, that is correct.
So
Yeah, I got 2 emails saying that there was a meter done in November last year and then another meter done during the springtime. So I don't know.
So Ms. LaPierre, was there, were the TACUS crews in your neighborhood putting in the fiber optic lines anytime recently in the last couple months?
Yes, a week prior or 2 weeks prior, around the time before I received that usage bill, they were in my front yard with a big like tractor track thing, and some piping. So if something happened, that would. But again, I still don't see any water in my yard or anything. It's very odd. And then they say it started and stopped. And it's in the email there, the dates. It was like April to this, it was dumping. Then it stopped, and then it started again in May, and then stopped. And they're saying it's not dumping now, but we can't find it, and no repairs have been made. So it's really odd.
So to our Woodlands Water personnel, is there any reason to think it could be some sort of an underground leak that's just not showing up at the surface? Does that make sense?
This is
Is that possible?
this is Randy. Just based off of my going to the property and looking at the outside of the property, and based off of the way the data shows, I don't think it's something going on outside. And it peaks up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days, and then it drops down for 1 day. Then it peaks back up again, and it's scattered. It almost looks like some type of toilet issue or some type of internally water softener issue. I don't, but without further
I
looking
sent
into it.
pictures, and you guys are welcome to come in my home and I advise that day, and you guys called my limb. We do not have a water softener. We don't have a pool. We don't have an irrigation system. And there is no water damage, no leak in my house. Absolutely, I would have been report. I'm a renter. I would tell my landlord. There is no water damage, no leaking, not even a running toilet. And it's a 3-bedroom, 1-story little bitty home with 2 toilets and 3 sinks, 1 tub and a shower, and there's no leaks.
Understood.
We
So Randy,
actually had a plumber come out to a separate plumber that my landlord hired to come out to check, because the water company called him and contacted him, and he's foreign, and he called me thinking I wasn't paying my water bill, and why is your water bill so high? And he sent out someone came and checked in the attic and everything, and there was no water damage in the house.
so
this is
to
Brian. Hey,
Woodlands Water, just one
go ahead,
last
Kyle.
one last question, and then I know we'll need to move on because we're not going to resolve this right now. But to our Woodlands Water personnel, can we get some sort of a download from AMI showing, what time of day, and kind of is there a chart that we can see how this water usage has played out over the last couple of months? I would like to see that, as much detail as possible so we can figure out if there's a pattern of some sort.
This is Randy. I have a copy of that data download. I did a data download a month ago, and then I did another one this evening on my way out to see if there was anything that had changed on it. But I can get that sent over to whoever needs to see it first thing in the morning, if that's possible.
All right, that'd be good. Brian, you wanted to make a comment?
This is Brian. I was going to just suggest that we hit the pause button on this discussion. I think, it needs to get more fully vetted and brought to the board with kind of a complete set of facts and information and a recommendation from staff on how to handle it. That's the most efficient way to handle it.
Okay, I agree. I'd like to recommend that we table this for now. We assure Ms. LaPierre that no action is going to be taken in terms of cutting off the water, and hopefully by next month's meeting, we'll have an understanding of what's wrong and how to resolve it and how to deal with any cost associated with that. And I just don't really see that there's anything else we can do right now, since we still don't even understand the problem. So with that said, Ms. LaPierre, we will get back to you, with next steps and figure it out.
Okay, I'm just very concerned about getting stuck with very high bills, because at this point, honestly, I'll have to move out of my home, because as a single mom going to school, diabetic with minor children, I can't afford that or anywhere near that. Like I said, my bill's never been over $60 a month. So it's very detrimental for me.
This board will do everything possible to make sure you're treated totally fairly. And, that's the best we can do.
I appreciate your assistance. If you don't mind, then I can disconnect from the call after this.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
So let's move to item 3, which is consider an act on request for adjustments or relief, which really that's kind of what that was. But as we know, we still need more information. So let us know what you figure out. All right, so that brings us to the consent agenda, which is multiple items here. Review and act on the minutes, financial reports and disbursements, tax collector's report, approving per diem and associated expenses for attendance to water trustee business events. And then item 8, which is, we don't see this every time, authorize completion, execution, and filing with the Secretary of State of Voting System annual filing form relative to district elections. Does anybody have questions on any of these? Would you like more information from Maureen or the tax collector report, any of these items? I would like a little explanation on item 8, if somebody could just clarify what that's about.
This is Brian. Kyle, that's an annual housekeeping item that we have on the agenda each year to handle that filing electronically on behalf of the district. Our paralegals handle that administrative task, but we do put it on your agendas for approval. We stick these kind of annual items now on the consent agenda since they're recurring each year, so that it kind of reduces the time going through on the explanation. But it's something that you see each year.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda?
I have one item on this, Don Search. Item 12 on page 3 in the packet. Director Nelson made a motion to provide storm drain markers, seconded by Director Unknown.
Yeah. Well, Shelley, is that something you can look up in your notes to fill that in? Item 12, whoever seconded that motion?
I sure can.
All right,
Thank you.
then assuming we can fill that name in, is everybody good with the rest of the consent agenda? And if so,
Yeah.
would somebody like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda? Or the consent
I'll move.
agenda items? Okay, we have a
I'll move.
second.
Yeah.
We got a motion from Don Sarich and Paul, or is that you seconding? All right, you're coming in really broken.
Yeah, that's a second by Nelson.
All right, thank you. Then we'll go ahead and call the vote. This is Kyle Mays. I vote aye. Paul, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Don, how do you vote?
Aye.
Henry, how do you vote?
Aye.
Stephanie, how do you vote?
Aye.
All right, that takes care of the routine items, brings us to item 9, San Jacinto River Authority Woodlands Division Report.
Good afternoon, directors. This is Matt Corley. On page 13 of your packet should be the Woodlands Monthly Operations Report. I'd like to report the blend ratio fiscal year to date is 49% groundwater to 51% surface water. And there were no permit violations for the month of May. Be happy to answer any other questions regarding the report if you have any. If no questions,
How are
I'll
we
turn.
doing on, this is Kyle Mays. How are we doing on water usage this year? You know, and where does that put us with the budget? You know, we've had a lot of rain in the last few weeks. Is it influencing the budget at all?
I'll let Chris answer that question.
This is Chris Meeks. Yeah, so far we're tracking pretty decent along with budget. It's a little bit under what we'd prefer. I think by just a couple percentage if memory serves. One thing is we do not have the May financials for this meeting because the meetings were actually closed a little bit early. But so far the weather has not impacted too much of the revenue for the Woodlands Division.
Okay. Any other questions for Matt or Chris? Or anybody else at the San Jacinto River Authority?
If not, I know Ron had a few comments that he'd like to make regarding GMA 14.
Just regarding GMA 14, we appreciate those who participated in the public hearing by Lone Star and provided comments. Just a reminder that comment period is still open until July 19th. GMA 14 is expected to meet in October. It was scheduled for October the 6th to vote on the DFCs, but I understand that that's going to be a different date. We have not been told what different date. Again, we want to thank everybody's participation.
All right, thank you. So that would bring us to item 10, which is receive and discuss San Jacinto River Authority Woodlands Division budget.
Yes, sir. This is Chris Meeks again. This item is on the agenda just in case you have any questions on the budget that was presented.
Personally, I think I remember it being relatively routine. Anybody have questions for Chris regarding SJRA budget?
I just, a couple months ago, we were talking about a 50-50 blend ratio, and I guess what I'm reading is we're still doing 65-35. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. This is Chris Meeks. Yes, sir. At the time the budget is prepared, it is for a 65-35 blend. In the future, that may come back to the trustees for a discussion point and potential vote, but that's later on in the future. Ron,
Okay.
Ed, do y'all want to add anything additional?
We're going to, just like you said, we're going to be looking at bringing in a rate consultant to look at that rate. And so it'll be later on this year.
Well, and as part of this is Kyle Mays, is part of the audit committee for the Woodlands Water trustees. There was a meaningful difference in water rates going with 65-35 as opposed to 50-50. And it seemed like that was the best compromise for now, particularly while there's all this legal wrangling going on and certain SGRA customers not paying their full bill. And I don't think the 65-35 is intended to be a long-term thing, but it's intended to help us get through, while, some of these things were worked out.
I've been thinking about this issue and the whole groundwater withdrawal into the woodlands and subsidence, and I have an idea. Has there been any thought to increasing woodlands to 50-50 and decreasing Conroe to compensate for that? The net effect is that Conroe would be forced to pump more groundwater, and their subsidence would increase relative to the woodlands.
Don, I would love to do that. I would love to drop them to zero surface water.
Well, we can't do that because of the operating of the transmission line.
Well, no, I know. But
I'm glad you can't see my face.
No, I would love that idea, Don. I think it's a great idea, but unfortunately, for various different legal reasons, we have to leave. Everybody has to stay the same for now.
On the other hand, you could give them all surface water to Conroe and let them deal with all the Lake Conroe residents who would be howling as the water level dropped. All right, yes, this is obviously a thorny issue. Any other comments that are like associated with the agenda here, or can we move on? All right, then we'll move on to the item 11, which is our attorney's report. Brian.
This is Brian. Thank you, Kyle. Main item I've been covered under the attorney's report on this round of meetings is the status of remote versus in-person meetings. We did have a good bit of discussion about that at the trustee meeting last week. The governor has renewed the disaster proclamation for another 30 days. Did that at, I think it was last Monday. So that will, the next round will, next 30-day period will expire shortly before the trustee meeting. We are in communication with the governor's office, and I have been advised that we would get some advance notice before that proclamation would be rescinded, so that we could make arrangements for our district clients to meet in person once that proclamation is lifted. But at this point, we don't have any indication on when that date will be. But with cases being as low as they are statewide, we got to think that that's coming sooner rather than later. As far as our district clients that meet at our offices, we are preparing to be able to host those meetings in person beginning after Labor Day for those districts that would like to do so, assuming that the governor's proclamation is still in place and they're not obligated to do so. We are looking at having a somewhat more accelerated time frame for the Woodlands districts that meet at Woodlands Water's administrative building. The trustees voted to hold their first in-person meeting post-COVID next month, and they also voted to recommend that the MUD boards wait one additional month and consider at their next month's meeting whether to go back in person in August. And the rationale behind that was to give a little bit more time as kind of a phase in to having the trustees be able to start the meeting in person process, work out any kinks, make sure everybody feels comfortable with the arrangements, and ensure that there's not any issues associated with that. And we're going to have more interaction between board members at the MUD level as opposed to JPA, with different MUD boards coming in as other MUD boards are going out, because our meetings are stacked one after the other. So I think that would give us a little bit more time to complete that transition process after we've been remote for such a long period of time. So that was a recommendation from the trustees. Each MUD board, of course, has discretion to make the decision about when it's ready to go back in person. But that's the recommendation we have from the trustees at this point. There have been a couple of questions from directors about the possibility of boards being able to have a hybrid meeting alternative. And the answer to that is not quite as straightforward as you might think. The governor's suspension of the in-person meeting requirements is such that if you are actually meeting in person, then you cannot avail yourself of the remote meeting option that you have because of the governor's proclamation. So you can't have 3 people or more meet in person at Woodlands Water and then have someone else call in by telephone and participate, relying on the governor's proclamation. But what you can do is the statute that was enacted, golly, it's probably 5 or more years ago now, that allows for video conferencing. That was 551.127 of the Texas Open Meetings Act. That's been in place for a little while. We did go through and do some due diligence on behalf of what was then JPA about the possibility of having these video conference meetings. And at the time, came to the conclusion that it would be cost prohibitive to have the necessary audio video equipment in place to be able to comply with the requirements of the statute. Now, a lot has changed over the last 5 or 6 years, especially with COVID, and a lot of technology for remote meetings has advanced very quickly. Zoom went from, hardly anybody knowing about it to everybody pretty much using it in personal and professional activities. So it may be possible to be able to handle that going forward. The statute does require that you have 3 directors physically in place at the meeting location, and then you could have the other 1 or 2 directors participate by video conference. So you wouldn't be able to participate by telephone conference. It does have specific requirements about about audio and video feed. So right now, because of the governor's proclamation, we're actually required to do telephone, but districts can voluntarily do more than that, which is what we're doing in the Woodlands. We have Zoom that has a conference call option or a video conference option. If you're using the governor's proclamation, that's fine to be able to have that dual functionality. But if you're not under the governor proclamation and you're relying on that separate provision of the Open Meetings Act, it would have to actually be video conference. So there are some additional limitations once we get outside of the proclamation. But if there are boards that are very interested in considering that option, then we can certainly look into that and see how that could be done on a forward-going basis. So that's where we are at this point. Trustees in person in July, and MUD's anticipating to be in person in August unless the boards choose to defer that until a later date. So that's all I have on the attorney's report at this time. Happy to answer questions if you have them.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions regarding our attorney's report? All right, let's move to item 12. Receive and act on staff information regarding the upcoming MCAD Board of Directors election for the term of office starting next January and through December 2024.
Last month, we talked about Metro Center MUD notifying MCAD that they wanted to have a special purpose district election and candidate. This month, we're naming the candidate. Metro did pass a resolution for Arthur Bredehoff. So there's no action required today, but if you would like to show support for Arthur, you may adopt the same resolution, and it's in your packet.
All right, what page is that resolution in?
I have page 21.
Yeah. So basically this, if we choose to adopt this, it's saying the Board of Directors of MUD 7 do hereby nominate a particular candidate. In this case, we're talking about Arthur Bredehoff, who has been a long time MUD board and Woodlands Water trustee.
That is correct.
Anybody have any strong feelings one way or the other about making this resolution as a board? Okay, I would ask Jim, do you feel like having us approve this resolution, would that somehow be helpful in his candidacy and to the Woodlands Water Agency effort generally?
I know it couldn't hurt anything, and there might be a situation where it would be helpful. Yes.
Okay.
You know, based on that, Mr. President, I would support a motion or present a motion to go ahead and write such a letter of recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Anybody like to second that?
This is Stephanie. I'll second.
Okay, then let's take the vote. This is Kyle Mays. I vote aye. Paul, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And Henry, how do you vote?
Aye.
Don, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Stephanie?
Aye.
All right, thank you. That's unanimous. And so we will adopt that resolution and support Mr. Bredehoff. So that brings us to item 13. And we got an email from Shelley on this earlier, I believe. Consider an act on potential funding partnership with MUD 67 on some drainage improvements that are going to be made along the Bear Branch, Panther Creek Research Forest drainage areas. Does somebody kind of want to walk us through the thought process here?
Yes,
The
and then
numbers?
I've got a copy of that same document that I can share on the screen here in a minute. First of all, I'm going to do a little recap. This is a project that's been worked on for many, many, many months with MUD 67 taking the lead. And in May, it was actually approved by the Texas Water Development Board for funding assistance. The funding came through in a 10% grant and a 30-year 0% interest loan. MUD 67 has stated publicly all along that they were willing to take the lead to try to get this project, the funding assistance with the Water Development Board, but they felt like that it had some community benefits and drainage benefits for other MUDs as well. It's about the project is estimated around a little over $11 million. So under the current scenario, a little over $1 million would be in a grant, and then the project cost would be about $10 million. I'm going to share well,
Jim, where is MUD 67?
I'm trying to pull that up, but it's not showing for some reason on my screen. Okay, here we go. There's one. MUD 67 covers the Woodlands High School. Can you see my pointer going around?
Yeah.
The Woodlands
can.
High School, the Flagstone, Capstone neighborhood, Twinberry. This is predominantly MUD 67. MUD 7 along Panther Branch, of course, most of you know is in this area, but we've clouded in the area where we can see the benefit occurring to homes. Here would be a benefit. A number of homes here, that neighborhood is underwater. MUD 47 is also going to see a benefit down here. Many of these homes, water is in the backyards and flooding potential, street ponding. This drainage ditch here backs up and causes some issues with some of the homes that back up to it. So from a drainage, just a drainage improvement perspective, we've allocated about 65% of the drainage improvement would be for MUD 67, about 25% of the drainage improvement homes and areas would be 47, and MUD 7, the smallest number of homes and the smallest area, about 10%. I'm stumbling a little bit because there's another screen that I want to show. This one.
Can you just click share screen again? Because you stopped sharing. sharing. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, are you seeing it there?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. This screen gives the areas. MUD 67 is delineated here. MUD 7, you can see here, and a part of the bottom of the screen is cut off. This would be MUD 47 here, MUD 60. And these are MUDs that contribute. They drain into Bear Branch. This is essentially the drainage area for these MUDs that's either going to Bear Branch or Panther Branch. MUD 46 up in here ends up in Panther Branch. MUD 46 in this area, MUD 47 end up in Bear Branch. Here's Bear Branch running along here. Here's the Bear Branch Reservoir. There's Kirkendall. Meanders down towards Gosling. Here's Gosling. So what we've delineated here is the area of each of these MUDs that contributes to the drainage in Bear Branch or the flooding along Research upstream of Gosling. And that's going to be
Yep.
that's going to be reflected in this cost allocation breakdown. We've as I talked about, there's a drainage benefit, a direct drainage benefit for MUD 7, MUD 47, and 67. Homes, churches, schools will have a direct benefit. There's a commerce, mobility, transportation benefit also to the community that we're recommending that benefit be shared by the MUDs that drain into Bear Branch. And what you're seeing here is we've estimated a commerce and mobility benefit of about 30% of the $10 million price tag, the drainage benefit about 70% of the price tag. So if you look at MUD 7's 10% contribution as far as homes and area, a small percentage there, and MUD 7 has about 6.5% of the total drainage area going into it. So you would add these two numbers and your total cost would be about $829,000. Metro Center MUD doesn't drain into Bear Branch, but they have agreed to participate because they see the commerce and mobility benefit of having Research Forest open during these events for residents and commerce and transportation. And that, as I had mentioned over the many months, Research Forest becomes completely impassable in the area around Woodlands High School and Bear Branch Soccer Field by design. It's not a mistake. It was actually designed to be inundated. Those two areas of the Research Forest Drive roadway are below the floodplain. So what we're proposing here is an improvement over what the original design was, to where Research Forest could remain open. And that would right now, there's two major east-west thoroughfares, Woodlands Parkway and Research Forest. And when Research Forest is not passable, you either have to go up to 242 to get around or back down to Woodlands Parkway. So there's a commerce and mobility benefit that Metro has agreed to contribute $1 million. And with that contribution, this is what we're looking at, the allocation for each of the MUDs that are involved in this project.
So this is Kyle, Jim, and I've lived in MUD 7 for more than 20 years and can definitely see the benefit. My two questions would be, who will kind of oversee the aesthetics and the landscaping of how it looks after they come through and widen and deepen the ditches and build retention ponds and things like that? So who's going to make sure it looks good, number one? And then number two, how does an $829,000 expense to our budget affect our rates? And, would we be able to cash flow that, or how's that gonna work?
Hang on just a second.
For the question number one, you're not alone. Everybody wants this to be constructed to minimize any impacts to the natural environment. We already know no concrete slope paving. There's already ongoing discussions regarding the detention ponds to try to see that they're constructed as a community amenity rather than just a big hole in the ground. There's a lot of desire to make sure that they are a amenity rather than just a big detention area. And as far as the modifications to Bear Branch and Panther Branch, the concept right now is primarily to redefine the channel to a trapezoid earthen channel. Minimal excavation really is going to be required, just more reshaping and widening a little bit and thinning some of the areas out. The areas that are very, very thick with underbrush, you would thin those out, and it would be like a park-like setting where you could throw a Frisbee through the area, but the large trees would remain, but it would be less underbrush is the concept. And that would be overseen by our staff and our engineering consultant. And we understand and very sensitive to keeping that area looking right, looking good.
And then the
And
budget.
Jim,
this is
this
Brian.
Don-
Kyle, this is Brian. So Kyle, as your second question on the financial impact. So the district right now has around $2 million in operating reserve. So this will be a little less than half of the operating reserve. However, what the district does have is the ability to essentially recoup just about all of it next year through your same tax rate, because right now the district is cash flowing the wireless water meters, and without that wireless water meter amount, you would basically be generating about an $800,000 surplus this year. So you could essentially replenish that amount next year with your same tax rate. And I haven't even looked at what appraisal creep is for this year based on your preliminary values. So it's definitely doable from a cash flow perspective, because this would be, by each of the districts, it's going to be an upfront cash payment into an escrow account. MUD 67 would be issuing bonds to the Water Development Board that would be placed, those bond proceeds would be placed into the escrow account. And then engineering and construction costs would be paid out of that escrow account until the project's completed. Then there'd be a final accounting, and if there's any remaining funds left over, they'd be rebated pro rata back to the participants.
Okay, well, that's all positive. Thank you.
Jim, this is Don. So last month, this was a $10 million loan and a $1 million grant. Is this the same project? Why are we putting funds up front now?
Well, MUD 67 has sponsored the project. They will be getting essentially the loan for $5 million. And the participation from the other MUDs would be in the form of a cash payment to help make the project viable.
Yeah, this is Brian. So Don, what the way the application process was structured is that the applicants had to show how the project would potentially be funded by itself. And so it had to either already have all the commitments lined up from all the parties in advance of even applying for the grant and loan, or they had to show how they could handle it by themselves, even if they did not have any plans to actually do that. And so that's what 67 did. They moved forward and said, okay, we'll be the sponsor of this and try to get it teed up just so we can get approval for a 0% loan and some amount of grant funds. But we have no intention of paying full freight for this. The district has limited bonding capacity remaining. They've only got $5 million in change. And so it had to be characterized as part of it was going to be a property tax bond, and part of it would be a revenue bond. And there are other beneficiaries from this project. So they said, we're willing to sponsor this to try to get a 0% loan and try to help push this ball forward. But if we're able to get approval, we're not actually, we 67 are not going to move forward with this project unless we get other participants that are willing to cost share 50% or more of this project. So the cost allocation that Jim has come up with, and what was critical in this, as Jim mentioned, was Metro's willingness to contribute, which they did indicate last night that they are. So they have authorized, as well as MUD 60 has now authorized, you are the third district, to move forward with participation and preparation of an interlocal agreement to memorialize that and set up the process for moving forward. So, we were, you had pretty long odds to get an application like this approved. We're really excited that 67 was able to do that. But now the hard work begins, and we need our partners, all the Woodlands districts to be willing to partner on this, to be able to help it move forward. And so that's where we are now.
So this is not a $10 million loan from the Water Development Board?
This is Brian. It will not ultimately be a $10 million loan from the Water Development Board. No, it was approved for up to 10 million because they had to account for all the costs, the anticipated costs associated with the project. And that's just how they structure the application. So the way it would in reality work is you would have 67 issue bonds for around 5 million. You would have the other MUD participants put up the other roughly 5 million or so, and then there would be some component of grant funds. The grant funds are a function of how much the loan is, so they wouldn't be a full $1 million. It would be more along the $500,000 mark. But that's how it would ultimately be structured in reality.
So a $5 million loan, $5 million from the MUDs, and some other grant proceed. Is that the way it is?
This is Brian. That's correct.
Okay, so the commitment that's shown in that table is 800,000 to MUD 7. Is that actually 400,000?
This is Brian. No, that's for the full 10 million cost share that MUD 7 would be responsible for 829,000 and change.
Okay, but half of that paid out over 30 years.
MUD 67's obligation would be the 4.9 in change.
Okay.
That would presumably be the bondage. They don't have the cash. They don't have that kind of cash to put up front on this deal, and so they would be issuing the bonds at the 0% interest rate to be able to fund their 5 million responsibility.
Okay.
Brian, this is Kyle Mays. Any reason, or Jim for that matter, any reason to believe that MUD 47 will balk at a $2.7 million expense or have trouble
this
paying
is
for
Brian. So that meeting is after y'all's, as I'm sure y'all know. They did issue bonds last year that included a fair amount for drainage channel rehab that could be used for this project. Also, they have some additional bond funds that, if they so chose, could be repurposed for this project. And then they also have a pretty healthy operating reserve as well to be able to participate. They've got about 6.5 million in operating reserve. So they can, they've got funds to be able to handle their pro rata share.
I
Excellent.
wanted to
Thank
ask
you.
Jim if, other than Metro, that most of these numbers are derived through pro rata shares of surface area that will be in the drainage? Question mark.
If you can see the spreadsheet, yes, about 3 million of it is 2 million of it is derived from the surface area contribution. And 7 million is allocated to the drainage benefit, of which MUD 7 has about 10% of that.
And then I guess I don't know how many of them have come through, but if anyone decides they won't, does that put the quietus on it, or do we have to punt and find another way?
Yeah, this is Brian. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but if it does,
Right.
then the other participants would have to put up more, or it would kill the deal. And that's just the bottom line.
All right. So thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, well, this is Kyle Mays, and I would like to make a motion that we support this Bear Branch, Panther Branch Research Forest Improvement Project with our pro rata share as outlined in the spreadsheet for $829,000. And so do we have a second to that motion?
I second and Nelson.
Okay, any
This is
discussion?
Brian. If I may, if we could also have as part of that motion authorization to prepare the interlocal agreement in connection with the project. That interlocal agreement will come back to each of the participating districts, and that's when you'll have final approval. So we just want authorization to prepare that in connection with this action as well.
Okay, I agree and modify my motion to include the preparation of the interlocal agreement. Jim, do you mind unsharing just so I can see who's all on the screen better?
There we go.
Any other questions, comments, discussion?
I just second
Okay,
that
thank you,
as
Paul.
amended. I second the motion as amended.
Do we need something in there that says we'll revisit this if one of the other buds balks?
Well, I think we would have to by definition, because we're only approving the 829,000. So if somebody else backs out, it would
Okay.
have to be more than that, which would require us to revote.
Yes. That's fine. I know that's what you said, Kyle, but I just wanted to be sure it gets worded that way.
Okay. Well, I'm with you on that in principle. We would need to rediscuss, see what
We
the
agree.
impact would be. Okay, then I'm going to call for the vote. This is Kyle Mays. I vote aye. Stephanie, how do you vote?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Henry?
Aye.
Paul?
I vote aye.
Very good. Motion carries unanimously. And that brings us to the general manager's report, item 14.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple of items to highlight from the trustee meeting. I did report that we are continuing our meetings with TACUS to talk about construction techniques and notification protocol. Damage to the mud facilities are substantially down from where they were a couple of months ago. We have re-invoiced the 5 prime contractors. TACUS has had 5 prime contractors working for them in the Woodlands. And we, with some guidance from our attorney and some help from TACUS identifying who those primes were in the areas where the damage occurred, we've re-invoiced those 5 prime contractors and informed them that we consider this reimbursement or this invoice past due, and stipulated that we expect receipt next week. And we will see how that plays out. And I think it's clear that we are prepared to take all parties to court to recover these expenses. There's an update from HARC in your packet, a monthly update. I would draw your attention to the fact that there's also comments that they prepared for Lone Star Groundwater District's Phase 2 subsidence study that were submitted on behalf of the consortium. And also the Science Advisory Committee has created a recommendation for additional GPS sites and extensometer sites around Montgomery County. That document is currently in draft form, but I expect it to come out with a press release probably this week, along with a story map that's been prepared for the consortium on groundwater and subsidence issues in Montgomery County. So look forward to seeing that. We're still looking at options for the 2 poles that are causing concern in the area of Slash Pine and the other up near Lake Woodlands Drive in Kirkendall. We have identified several locations in Sawmill Park and Forest Gate Park as potential relocation sites. Those are being vetted, and we'll get that information back to you when complete. We are also working with the San Jacinto River Authority to try to put ourselves in a position to capture any funding that may come out of the the Biden infrastructure bill. With the help of Ron Kelly and Ed, we've put together a short list of consultants and lobbyists. We are also trying to finalize a meeting with Kevin Brady to sit down and get his feedback and guidance in our efforts. And that concludes my report. And Kyle, you're muted.
Well, trying to not make any noise while you were talking, but thank you, Jim. Okay, that brings us to item number 15, actually, and I'm glad you forgot to mention one thing, Jim, because I'm happy to mention that at last week's trustee meeting, we voted to approve a proclamation that basically is recognizing the above and beyond work that our Woodlands Water Agency staff did during COVID, during the freeze, during all these TACUS problems. Basically, compared to a lot of water customers around the state, the Woodlands has operated relatively smoothly, even though behind the scenes, our Woodlands Water Agency staff was dealing with COVID and remote work and damage to our system from TACUS and so forth. So I'm looking for the wording on that. I'm not sure we have the wording on the proclamation. That's probably still being written. But anyway, I was glad to see the board vote to recognize the hard work and the good work done by our Woodlands Water Agency staff. And frankly, I think San Jacinto River Authority deserves some of that credit too. And our staff was paid a little bit of a bonus too, just in recognition of the above and beyond the call of duty work that they've done. So that's exemplary. Thank you to our staff members on the call today.
And we did get the proclamation finalized, and we'll be providing a copy to the trustees via email later this week. And it will be given to the employees with payroll tomorrow or Thursday.
Very good. Any questions for Jim or me regarding last week's trustee meeting? All right, that brings us to item 16, discuss any matters for placement on future agenda. I think I'd like to put Ms. LaPierre's water bill issue on next month's agenda. That really like to resolve her issue, if at all possible, or at least understand it.
And I will, there's a lot more to offer that I know Mike and Randy have been trying to work with this customer and with with some limited success, but it is a smart meter. We're convinced the water is going through the meter. Where it's going is the challenge, and to figure that out, and we'll continue to work on it. But we will put our account in suspension until we get this resolved.
So, maybe we can have a range of recommendations, at this point, as trustees or directors, we're kind of in the blind knowing what's the right solution, because we have really no idea if somebody's at fault, or if it's just unlucky for this lady that her system is working like this. So hopefully you guys will have some suggestions as our staff professionals as to what's the right way to handle this.
I think the first thing is to figure out, with some cooperation from the homeowner and the landlord, as to what it is.
Okay, that wasn't clear that this is a rental property.
Yes. And it's my understanding we have been refused access into the house up until the offer today. That it was limited communication through a 1-inch gap in the door.
Oh, boy. Okay, well, hopefully there won't be drama associated with trying to fix this. Sounds like maybe there has been, but, we know you guys will do the best you can. And then, give us some recommendations on how you feel like the district needs to respond.
Absolutely will do.
Very good.
Right.
Okay, everybody.
Yeah, this is Paul. I just wanted to reiterate what you said about the activities and the job well done by SGRA and the Woodlands Water during that freeze. All over the state of Texas, all over Houston, all over Harris County and the county surrounding us, there were districts that just had to shut down. There was no water supply, et cetera, because of the freeze. I mean, that's discounting houses that froze or pipes. I'm talking about systems. And I as far as I know, we had none. And I think that was remarkable. So I just wanted to say thanks and job well done.
You're here. Anybody else? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you, Carl.
Have a good night.